Amanda?
All right, let's go ahead and get started with the work session for the City of Evans, April 2nd. Item 1 on the agenda is Neighborhood Services 2018 Annual Report. And it's you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Very pleased to have the first annual, at least in a while, annual report on neighborhood services, which currently is almost entirely code enforcement for reasons we'll talk about later. I want to introduce to my right, you might not see him often, but most of us know Kyle Fair, who is our code enforcement officer. Kyle's a one-man show for most of the year. He gets a little bit of help with some resource in the summertime, which is good, and we're grateful for that. But as I got to know kind of the code enforcement program and realized the breadth and depth of the work that we do and the work that is to be done in Evans, I think it's important that we highlight code enforcement once in a while and seek some direction from council on kind of areas of focus and any other thoughts council might have. Tonight is, I would say, part 1 of 2. We wanted to talk about the work that code enforcement has been doing and show the annual report that we plan to make available on our website and in other formats as well. But then I hope that this kind of gets us thinking, because we want to come back to you in a month or so with part 2, which will focus on the areas of opportunity, the amount of work that we feel we still have to do in Evans in code enforcement, the benefits that it could have, and hopefully a business model that might help us to get more done within the budget that we already have. So, and at that time, I think we'll probably request more direction on what those priorities should be, because there's a lot of work out there to be done. So tonight we want to share the work that's been going on and see if that starts any thoughts for council. We want to take that feedback on things that need to be done, and then, as I say, about a month from now, we'll come back with more detail on future and how we can get even more done. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kyle. Randy Reedy's here also, especially since Randy's been here. That's where a lot of the discussion about broadening neighborhood services to a more kind of holistic focus on our neighborhoods and getting more done within code enforcement has happened. So I want to give Randy some kudos there, but I think Kyle, who's been doing all this work, will give the report tonight. So Kyle, there you go.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Rudy, members of council. Thank you for having me tonight. It's a pleasure to present first annual report since I've been here, at least, to you. This is the clicker. All right, some 2018 highlights that were somewhat outside the daily grind of writing notices and citations for properties is I did have a little more involvement in the fall cleanup last year. Wanted to make some user-friendly changes to that event. Built these sign stands for each station we had at the cleanup event. So brush, trash, scrap metal, tires, stuff like that. And for the first time in the history of the cleanup event, we did accept tires. And it was, we accepted them for a fee, and we'll be doing that again this year as well. And it was quite a success. We had well over 800 tires collected at the fall cleanup event. Additionally to that, the American Association of Code Enforcement National Conference came to Broomfield last year. And I did go and attend that as well. And worked with HR. Our seasonal code enforcement position had been at about the same hiring range, same level of compensation for many years, and was falling out of pace with being comparable with local communities. So we did do some look into some other communities with human resources and got that rate adjusted to a more comparable rate. And we had some good success last year in hiring a seasonal code enforcement officer. All right, some of the 2018 violations, violations by type. You can see here, the majority of violations we're addressing currently in Evans are nuisance codes, which are there to preserve the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So these are primarily going to be the top three that we usually address are trash, inoperable vehicles, and weeds. Some of these photos were all from Evans in 2018. Graffiti, I call that one on the bottom left there, Trash Mountain. That's probably the most severe case I've had there of a overflowing dumpster. And that vehicle up there, the resident did tell me that vehicle runs. However, I did argue that the windshield was not safe to drive down a city street.
Just one more point there. I think looking at the total, there's probably over 1,000 violations that were identified by it?
Yeah, and those are violations. So some properties we will have to, I may return to the same property many times for the same violation, might be trash or junk, but that will still just be one violation as it is recorded in our system. So even if it's a severe trash and junk violation, I have to return there 5 to 10 times to ultimately get it taken care of. That will still appear in the statistics as one violation. Violations citywide. Worked with our GIS analyst, Anna, this year to get some heat maps created for violations. And what we can see from the heat maps there is that the majority of violations occur east of 35th Avenue. And I think that's largely because most of the newer communities do have HOAs. And in more recent years, we've been seeing some really good work done with those HOAs and a lot of proactive enforcement happening west of 35th Avenue. I think there's only a few communities to the east of 35th Avenue, North Point, and the Ridge, both have HOAs, but with those exceptions, the majority of east of 35th Avenue does not have an HOA.
Could that be also because there's a higher percentage of rental properties east of 35th Avenue?
That might be the case. I don't have any statistics to verify that. And I know there are quite a few rentals in Tuscany, Ashcroft, and Grapevine as well. But yes, rental properties are definitely a code enforcement prime target that we deal with quite often. These the three photos there on the right are actually all from one property that was reported by the neighbor last year, and that yucca made for a pretty precarious pedestrian situation up there. Activities by quantities. So each activity that we have set up in our system related directly to code enforcement, we do track in that system there, which is going to be after we discover a violation, whether it's reported or discovered by code enforcement. There will be an inspection. We'll issue a notice of violation. We'll follow up with a re-inspection after the allotted time frame. And then if the property is compliant, it gets closed at that time. Otherwise, under the administrative process, a citation will be issued and then a re-inspection scheduled. And that process will continue until the violation is brought into compliance. Abatements, I think we only had 16 in 2018, which I actually consider that a win. Our goal is not to be cleaning up private property for residents. We really want them to do the work or have the work done themselves. And the majority of those abatements are going to be for pretty severe weed violations or dead trees that residents did not have removed. I'm pretty reluctant to have outdoor storage or trash removed from a property, because to really do that properly, we would need to get an administrative warrant from the judge as we're seizing the property off of private property.
You might explain what an abatement is for some that might not be familiar.
Yeah, so under section 1.16 of our code, we do have an abatement process outlined in there where if there's an immediate threat or a violation that we're not gaining compliance on, the city can step in and have work done to correct that violation, and then we can assess the cost of that abatement to the property owner. I think it is actually listed in 1.16. We add a 15% fee to that for administration as well. The photo on the upper left there, that was actually a sovereign citizen we encountered last year, had some difficulty with. You can see the plates on that vehicle. It's a little bit hard to see in that photo, but there's a couple stickers on there that say private, no soliciting, and then that homemade license plate says private contrivance, no, basically no need for the government to apply here. So sovereign citizens do not recognize the authority of the government. And actually just got a call from the Attorney General today that they had uncovered some of the paperwork from August. That resident tried to claim that we were committing financial fraud on them by conducting code enforcement because we did not enter into a contract with them. The barrels there in the middle too, that was that is actually used cooking grease that a local business had located those barrels immediately behind the fence of a residential property. And I think I took that photo in July or August, so it was a pretty unpleasant situation for those residents as well.
Pause there for just a moment. Just want to point out or ask, is it fair to say, based on the graph, that probably 75% or so of the violations that are identified are resolved before citation? Yeah,
most definitely. The majority of cases do result in voluntary compliance, and I would actually say that percentage is much higher than 75%. I would probably say 9 out of 10 properties voluntarily comply. The probably higher rate of citations there, we do have some properties with severe violations that are addressed multiple times, multiple citations at each property. And the way our administrative process works is the first citation received is $150. The resident then has 7 days to comply with that, plus we allow them 5 days to receive that notice by mail as well. So a total of 12 days before we issue a second citation. Second citation is $500. If another 12 days the violation still exists, it goes to $999 every 12 days until that property comes into compliance. Yeah, just one other thing I didn't cover at that slide there. Some of the activities we're currently not documenting, we do collect signs in the right-of-way, whether they're "We Buy Ugly Houses" or garage sale signs, whatever it might be. We do stop and collect those signs from the right-of-way. And more recently, we've been collecting a lot of shopping carts from neighborhoods. If they're generally near the bus stops, I don't usually pick those up. Greeley Evans Transit has been pretty good about maintaining their bus stops, and they will collect shopping carts left at the bus stops as well. Administrative penalties. In 2018, we issued 290 citations, which came to a total of $101,000. Nearly $8,000 of those citations were paid in-house voluntarily, and the remaining penalties, they're generally collected with 1 year placed as a special assessment on the property taxes. Special assessments. In 2018, we placed about $96,000 in unpaid citations and abatement invoices, which included a few unpaid citations from late 2017. The cutoff with the Weld County Treasurer to have special assessments into the Weld Treasurer is December 1st. So we generally have some overlap every year where even if somebody received a citation in late November, they still have an appeals window where they can file an appeal for their citation for 7 days. So if they received a citation around Thanksgiving and they don't pay that citation, they will not receive a special assessment for that until the following year. All right, a little more positive side. We are still currently running the Yard of the Month program. May through October, we select 1 yard each month for displaying exemplary property maintenance, and we make contact with that resident and provide them with a $50 gift card to Happy Life Gardens, and we have a Yard of the Month yard sign that they, some people really love that. They want to put it up in their yard, and some people would prefer we just keep it, but they still take the money if they refuse the sign. So.
Kyle, the top left picture, does that actually meet Evans code?
The top left one?
Yes.
Yeah, as far as landscaping.
I thought around 2006, the council passed an ordinance that said that you had to have a certain percentage. It seems like it was something like 60% had to be in grass or landscaping. Yeah, so there we do have some landscaping codes that I think any subdivision, I'd have to look back specifically the dates, but any subdivision that came in after, I think, 2001 required ground cover. And I think that's pretty much all that code says. And then our off-street parking section, it's a little obscure location in our code for that, but it does still require that 45% of the yard be what's defined as open space in that code. So as far as I'm concerned, if they want to do a full-on xeric landscaping and have some plants, stones, wood mulch, stuff like that property, I mean, I'm happy to see that, because a lot of properties I deal with have zero landscaping or mowed weeds at best. So yeah, I would say that property is absolutely compliant with our landscaping code. Well, I've had some questions over the years about there's a property on, I think, 38th Street Road that has astroturf or something for the front yard. So,
yeah.
And
yep.
There's a couple other ones around
sure.
there, so I understand it from what people.
Yeah, and astroturf would be considered ground covered, so that would probably meet the code as well. In fact, I know, and I think HOAs are kind of struggling with this code or this enforcement currently too, because 2015 there was a House bill as well that prohibited HOAs and local governments from requiring grass. So you could still require ground cover and landscaping, but you can't require specifically sod on the property. All right, looking forward, we'd like to kind of present you with some ideas of what neighborhood services could be, as Jim mentioned, with some additional resources and some more stable assistance outside from the seasonal summer help as well. Some of these photos are actually looking back. That top left photo there, in 2014, I came in on a Saturday and organized with UNC. We did a volunteer project to clean up this State Farm neighborhood. So a bunch of students volunteered their Saturday morning and came in. The Parks Department provided loads of mulch and tools and stuff like that. And one seasonal employee, Teresa Pinkstaff up there, was one of our seasonal Parks staff members, and she came in on Saturday to help out with that project as well. And we got that done, and I thought that was just a pretty good example of what we can do with some interested parties and who want to clean up a part of town and maybe establish some more sustainable solutions, some better landscaping. They did spread mulch over that entire area where they removed weeds and mulch at that time. The top right photo there, that was actually a photo from the 2016 Bike to Work Day. And the city is still providing a station for that each summer since as well. In the Adopt a Street program, this sign is still up over near the Chaplow open space there, and I don't know that program has been in effect, at least since I've been here. But I think an Adopt a Street program would be another excellent way to involve businesses and organizations in the community to show pride and help keep the city cleaned up outside of some regular staff duties there. The bottom right photo, that is a block party trailer that's currently being run by the city of Arvada. And their city council member, that entire trailer and all the contents of it were donated by local businesses and community members to put that together. And it has been so popular, their city council has actually requested a second trailer because they have it basically booked out every single weekend throughout the summer. And essentially what that trailer is, it's a pretty simple idea. It's just they have about 8 folding tables in there, I think 32 folding chairs, a few large coolers, and then in a front section they have some road barricades and cones that if the residents having the block party fill out the proper permit to close off a section of road, they will unlock that front section as well, so they can set up some cones and just borrow the trailer for the weekend and have all the resources they need to have a block party on their street. Aside from that,
let me just finish. So, the last slide has a few ideas of what, we think that code enforcement could become in terms of a neighborhood services program. We think there's a lot more we can do to get neighborhoods involved, get neighbors talking to each other, engaging with the city. And I will say, I think, Kyle's skills and style, just as we see with the enforcement that we have through voluntary action, there's a lot here that we can work with. So we'd like to start the conversation about, getting more of these sorts of things going with neighborhoods. One other idea you'll be hearing more about is to do more zoning code enforcement, which we don't have any dedicated resources for, especially there are certain parts of town. The industrial area is one where there are lots of kind of land use questionable situations with uses and storage and using public right-of-way and things like that we believe could offer a lot of cleanup for us and strengthen that area. So we'd like to come back. I think it might take some resource, but we have some ideas for how we can do it in a fairly budget neutral way. And we'd like to hear tonight just any feedback that you have on the current program, any areas of focus, not necessarily specific properties, but when you look at all the things that Kyle's working on, if there are consensus areas of work or categories where we can focus more, we'd like to hear that from you. So that concludes our report, Mayor.
Questions or comments, Kyle?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So, first of all, I know we've discussed before in the past, and I want to just maybe bring it back up again, about maybe expanding the spring and fall cleanup events. I know we started doing the tires, but I know at one time we talked about like paint, bringing up materials like that. I know a lot of people have said that, the Well County, you can take it there, but their hours are limited. You can also take paint to certain, stores, I think Sherman-Williams, Diamond Mobile, but you can only bring a limited amount it's either per week or per month or something to that effect. So I was wondering if there's possibly a way to expand the program to include other materials to bring to our cleanup days. I think that would probably benefit a lot of people. My other question is regarding the outstanding assessments there. I mean, it seems like we've collected 7,700, but we've got about 93,000. Is there another revenue that the city has to collect that type of money? I know we attached to the property taxes, but is there any other way to collect that type of money? I mean, that seems like a lot of outstanding.
So, do you mind if I jump in for a second?
Sure.
So I think the reason you do that a lot of times is because it's a lot cheaper to put it on the tax roll. Right. So it's really expensive to have administrative staff to send bills for small dollar amounts. So oftentimes for relative customers like this that I have, we'll send one notice, we may send a follow-up, but then it becomes so costly to administer that we just let it go to the tax roll because we've done our due diligence. We've notified them. We'll notify them that it's going on the tax roll, and then so I'm assuming that's probably the same situation.
I understand that, and that's kind of wondering, do you utilize not only attaching it to the taxes, but collection? I mean, there's got to be, that's a lot of money to be.
It is, and I think that we're very successful in collecting the majority of that money every single year. The Wells County Treasurer, they essentially, if that assessment gets placed on a property and somebody has a mortgage, their mortgage company is going to pay those taxes immediately with the tax season, and then it's gonna show up in their escrow account for that property. If a property owner, if they own their property outright and they don't have a mortgage, the county still collects almost all of their taxes every single year through tax sales. So in that case, investors have an opportunity to buy those outstanding taxes, and then the property owner still owes them, and they will owe interest to the tax sale, the investor as well.
So we can clarify. I agree, Mayor Pro Tem. It looks like only a little bit is collected, but the vast majority is processed through the tax assessments and is then recovered. So
Okay.
I think you told me, is it in the 80% and 90%, or is it higher?
I would definitely say it's probably above 90% and collected in 1 year. And ultimately, a few properties, we had one it was the owner owned it outright, and it's been a problem that we've been dealing with since 2015. But last year, a family member came into ownership of that property, and they came in and paid off $25,000 in back taxes last year. So not all of that was from code enforcement citations alone, but our utility assessments are handled the same way as well.
And I've tracked one over there on Rachel Court years ago when I saw the city go there, mow the vacant lots.
Oh, yeah.
Clean it up. And it was probably paid because it was in the owned by a bank or something.
Yeah, yeah.
When was the last time we sent out the brochures of the code and stuff? Because I would hope that, you know, like annually or something, we might send out about, you know, trash and what's acceptable for weed and
Right.
you know what you have to do with that. You know if we've sent them out recently.
I'm not entirely sure. You're talking about some like proactive education, maybe in the newsletter.
Brochure.
Best practices.
I've seen a brochure.
Yeah.
I've seen it, but I haven't seen it recently.
Yeah, and I know communications does check in occasionally as to what to add to the newsletter. I don't think we do a printed newsletter anymore since we went to the Evans Express. I think that is just digital only, I believe. And I don't think we send out that newsletter with the utility bill, especially since a lot of customers don't even receive the utility bill anymore because they're with paperless billing and stuff like that. But we definitely do try and make education the top priority with code violations for sure. And even the notice process in itself, a lot of education in my experience comes from that. People receive the notice, they'll call in, and we can talk about that and a number of other issues. Because of course they always want to report all their neighbors as well that have a similar or violation as well. So I always feel like that provides a good opportunity for us to talk directly with those residents and kind of explain our codes there as well.
Do you think that there's a need to possibly update the code to reflect what, circling back to what Fred said about the landscaping, you know, about having grass, you know, and how the state says you can't penalize people for, you know, xeriscape and having no grass, but do you think maybe it might be a good time to maybe update that in the code and reflect that as well? Say, you know, xeriscaping, no grass is acceptable as well.
You know, that's a policy discussion that I think the council could have. I think xeric landscaping may have a part in our kind of water efficiency discussion that we're going to have with the community, and I think the council could set some additional guidelines and have a conversation about what's going to be the appropriate balance of you know, turf to xeric approaches. But I think that's something we could do.
I know for myself, and I know there's plenty of others that are out there, I mean, it costs a lot of money to maintain it, especially for like homeless people that want to have a very nice green. It's a lot of money to do that, and you know, as water becomes more scarce, and people that don't have potable or non-potable water systems, they have to use that sprinkler. So, I mean, I think it might be a good idea to have that discussion and say, hey, you don't want to have grass and you want to do something like this that's in the front cover. That's perfectly acceptable.
Here are the guidelines, and here's some ideas even.
Then how does that work if you live in a neighborhood with an HOA though? Can they still zone
HOAs can
dictate that?
Yeah, I
To
think
regulate.
They
can
gripe
store
about the
ground
water
cover.
and they gripe
Yeah.
about that, right?
Yeah.
I only speak from my own
Because
experience.
you've
but-
signed, you've signed their covenants, so.
Right.
I noticed that Windsor is entering, I believe it's a national contest on water efficiency again.
So I just want to say, Kyle, something noticed at the last cleanup that was totally brilliant was the signage. I think that helped with really organizing it, maybe making it a little bit easier for you guys to clean up because it was, split out. But at least for the users of it, it was easy to come in and say, oh, okay, there's where I put my sticks and this is where I put my dirt or whatever. So that was great. I hope we continue with that. Also, I didn't see anything here about abandoned or condemned houses, and I noticed one when we were driving around this afternoon. What does the city do with that?
I don't know of currently any abandoned properties. I know there's a few that are looking pretty rough, situations like that. And generally condemnation is handled through the building department. They ultimately are going to make that decision as to whether it's an unsafe structure. And there's the International Building Code does outline procedures for condemnation of unsafe or unsanitary structures like that as well. In my work, I'll absolutely always address all of the other codes that might be violated around, specifically related to that building. And then, of course, I'll always notify the building department anytime I see something that's potentially violating the building code as well.
I know of 3 right off the bat that are boarded up. So
Yeah.
just wondering how we address that eyesore.
Please, we would love to have the list of address.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I know there are some investors currently as well, with some of those properties at least, that are looking to subdivide, demo and build in those areas as well. So.
And then I would like for us to explore the zoning code enforcement. I see several places where I'm sure we're still discussing with the owner. One of them, you guys probably remember, the bridge storage. Bridges are still there.
Yep.
So anyways, I would like to have a little bit of the zoning code enforcement.
Sure, yeah. And that area specifically, we are currently working with our planners with Tetra Tech and making a plan to address that area as a whole.
I also want to congratulate you. Didn't 75% of the people to take and resolve the problem before you have to file a citation? And knowing how many citations you do, you must do an awful lot of work. But I think that's a pretty good percentage, 75%, to be cleared before they have to get cited.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, that's a really good point, because as one person, and
Yeah.
we've got the whole city, and I would love to see somehow, I know we're stretched in on budget, I would like to see a second person somehow added on, so that we can, I know he has summer help, but man, that's a year-round job.
Yeah.
And
And I loved compiling this report, but every minute I spent doing this, I wasn't writing tickets, which made me sad.
Yeah.
So.
Finding some additional resource would enable Kyle to focus more on where we're focusing, the way we're doing it, the other areas that you saw there, the zoning code cases, which are going to be very frequently complex, while we need to keep the ongoing code enforcement that you're seeing tonight happening. So I appreciate the support there, and we will be back to council with some recommendations on what we could get done if we added X amount of resource.
I would like to say that since Kyle has come in, that there's been a noticeable improvement in the way the city looks, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from different people about that. I've had some negative feedback from some people that got cited for something or told that they needed to take, especially trees, dead trees. It's like, well, it's on your property, it's a hazard. needs to be taken care of, and I know it's very expensive from personal experience to get it done. But I think he's done just an absolutely fabulous job, and I hope he hangs around and continues.
Thank you. I agree as well. Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Can I just mention one item?
Sure.
So you know how you have kind of like the little the activities, like there's a block party. Also, maybe even for like the summer when all the kids are out of school, there's that, what is it called, the trash tag challenge that encourages like bored teens to clean up. So it's like a before picture of an area, and then there's an after.
Okay.
Just kind of, it'll be fun, you know, for the summer, maybe to challenge children. Hey, you're bored? This is like, are you up for the challenge? You know, so it's kind of going around, and it's pretty interesting. So it'd be great for us to kind of like take that on as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Randy even mentioned an idea to me too. They used to do in his previous community of having like a city cleanup, kind of like that. People could clean up their own areas, and then they'd get together in that afternoon, throw them a barbecue or something like that. And everyone could reconvene in one area and kind of socialize and get out and meet each other. So.
Well, I like that idea of the block party, the socializing period, because I think it's a lot easier to talk to your neighbor about something if you know them well. Yeah. But we don't always know our neighbors. I know I've lived in my house for 7 years, and I know a good chunk, but I don't know all of them. And there are some that, you know, it would be nice to be like, hey, do you need help with this? Can I? As opposed to, oh my gosh, we have this violation. Oh my gosh, we have this violation constantly. So I think that encourages that direct communication in a kind, appropriate manner.
Sure.
So.
And thank you.
Thank you
for all your good work.
Thanks, Kyle. Good work. Thank you, Mayor. For a number of months now, our staff, along with the staffs Kersey and Greeley, have been talking and looking at a few different issues. I think future annexation interests and preservation of the river corridor, especially as it relates not to, you know, well, certainly to preserve a natural feel where appropriate, but also to have some agreement or consensus among the communities of what types of land uses are conducive to this shared areas and which might not be. I know our staff, your staff, brought this potential IGA and some of the discussion points to you in September in executive session, and you gave some direction to kind of keep going. We were generally on the right track. So the conversations have continued, and it's time when all three of the communities are hearing presentations from their staff. I would just say the one thing that's only lightly touched on, and probably appropriately so, and will need more work, is the annexation question. Everyone's agreeing at this point to not really change those 3 mile growth areas and also the current annexation. So just to let you know, that's a pretty heavy topic, and that'll be, I think this is practice for that topic when we start those conversations. But I would like to ask Randy Reedy, our Public Works Community Development Director, and our Management Analyst, Kaylin Myers, to just talk a little bit more about the process and the content of the IGA before you. Our request tonight would be for any questions, any comments, and if it meets your wishes, to give us direction to come back probably to for action once all of the communities have had an opportunity to talk about it. Is that Randy?
Yeah, just a couple other process comments. This is going through both the planning commissions and the city councils, town council of Kersey and Greeley. Went to our planning commission last week. They are forwarding it to you with their recommendation of approval. There were a couple of questions came up, but no comments or no proposed changes. It is, as I mentioned, also going through the planning commissions, the other locations. What you have before you is still the current version. We haven't heard of any requested changes. All three of them, I think Kersey is yet to meet. Has gone through Greeley Planning Commission and work session with their city council. So with that, I'll turn this over to Kaylin Myers. She's done a great job of shepherding us through the process. It started last spring and summer, came to you in the fall, and she's seen this through. So I've attended a couple meetings, but this has been in her bailiwick. She's done a great job in this role, her current role, for almost a year, and of course she was with the city for 3 years before that as a GIS analyst. And as you're about to see, her GIS and graphic skills serve her well as well. So, yeah, exactly.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. So as Jim mentioned, I came to you in September with kind of the preliminary. We were discussing this, and what you have in your packet is the kind of current version of the IGA. So if no changes are made, this is what we would be bringing forward to you to sign April 16th. So for a little bit of background, the shorthand for this is the CAG IGA, Kersey Evans Greeley. And this came about, kind of the impetus for it was in 2017, Kersey annexed a piece of property you may know as the Platte River Fort. It's right along the South Platte River. It's actually a nice little like wedding and event venue. But it was kind of within this area that was very close to Greeley's urban growth area. It was actually in our urban growth area as well, this kind of area where we all overlap. And that prompted conversations between Greeley and Kersey around annexation and sort of the shared area where all the communities come together. And Greeley and Kersey were actually meeting, and then they brought Evans into the conversation to kind of wanting to do this collaborative sort of agreement. So the staff that has been involved from Evans, I have been involved throughout most of the time. Our former economic development director was also attending the meetings, and then public works director has been there. Greeley's long range planner is who is kind of leading the effort, as well as their community development director, and then Kersey's city manager and Kersey's planner. So it's been sort of management level, director level staff that have really been kind of pushing this agreement forward. And what the IGA does is 3 really core things. One, it establishes a cooperative planning area. So all of the kind of rules and regulations that the IGA contemplates are only applicable within this cooperative planning area. 2, outline some annexation guidelines. Jim kind of mentioned this. They're not very rigid guidelines. They're just sort of areas where the municipalities can come together to discuss things. It doesn't say these boundaries are set in stone, or it doesn't really have any real like teeth in terms of annexation. It just kind of talks about the issue. And then the third thing it does, and this is probably the kind of biggest item that we should keep an eye on, is land use. So it talks about some prohibited land uses, and that's what you would want to probably review closely, just to make sure that we're okay with what those say. So the first thing that it does is set up this cooperative planning area. So what you see is the blue dashed line is a half-mile buffer around the floodplain, and then it's kind of matched up to streets and parcel lines just to make it a little bit cleaner. For reference, I've added in red is our urban growth boundary. So the only portion of Evans that's currently incorporated that is in the agreement is Riverside Park. And the reason for that is because the IGA really talks about wanting to be good stewards of the river. So the 3 communities come together around the river. It just made sense that Riverside Park would be kind of that keystone piece at this kind of southern boundary of the cooperative planning area. And then it goes north to the confluence of the Poudre and the Platte. So just for your reference, at this time, the only area within Evans city limits that's in the cooperative planning area is Riverside Park. Otherwise, it's kind of our unincorporated long-range growth. So annexation. So there are 3 sections under the annexation portion of the IGA. One talks about not annexing outside of our adopted growth management areas. So I've kind of added these stars to help us talk through what that looks like. So the first one is A. which basically says that we cannot annex outside of our current growth management area as it exists today as part of our comprehensive plan, unless it's to annex a property that's more than 50% contained within our boundaries. So if something's on the edge, it's more than 50% in our boundary, we can annex. There really aren't any parcels, I would say, that are going to act that way, at least between us and Kersey. It kind of cuts right on parcel lines, but that's what that would contemplate. B, this is kind of the part where we had the most discussion. There are some areas where boundaries overlap. We do not overlap with Greeley at all. Ours kind of follow the river, but we overlap with Kersey, and then Kersey and Greeley overlap. So within an area where there is overlap in growth management, the Platte River Fort is one of those examples. What this agreement says is the communities have to talk to each other. So you have to give notice. There has to be a discussion. Ultimately, though, it does come down to the property owner. So they have the ultimate choice in terms of where they want to annex. But this is sort of an effort to keep things collaborative and having the municipalities talking to each other, and hopefully just having some notice before an annexation takes place. And then the third annexation sort of scenario is, we can't annex in Greeley's growth management area. You can't, if it's outside of your growth management area, you just can't annex it. If we got a petition to annex, we would have to tell the petitioner to go to Greeley, essentially. And then I think it does say if they then said, no, we're not going to annex, it's like first right of refusal, then they could. But there are some other rules around annexation about contiguity and that also govern that. But just between the municipalities, that's what was discussed. And then 3, land uses. So the allowed land uses per the agreement are what's in the comp plan. So each municipality has an adopted comprehensive plan. This map is our future growth plan, and I'm just going to kind of filter only the part that is subject to the agreement. And so currently our long-range zoning for this area is rural residential, urban residential, high-density residential, river natural habitat, or commercial. So those are kind of the allowable uses in this area. I wanted to point that out because this next slide talks through the prohibited land uses, and you'll see a lot of them are industrial, so they wouldn't apply to what's in our comp plan now. So in other words, we're not prohibiting things that are already, they're things that we already wouldn't allow unless we went ahead and changed that vision, and we always can. But for now, what's in the IGA prohibited land uses are adult businesses, and then any intense industrial use, such as auto dismantling, crematoriums, foundries. There's kind of this list of items, and this is the comprehensive list. So right now, this is what the list looks like, and there is a definition section that's an exhibit to the agreement. And the real idea behind these prohibited land uses was nothing that's going to be very noisy, creating a lot of smells, anything that would be a pollutant, wanting to keep that river corridor nice and friendly. And then also our entryways all come together in this area. So, you're driving in and out of Evans, in and out of Greeley and Kersey, and wanting to kind of have it be a welcoming sort of place. So these are the prohibited land uses that are suggested in the agreement. The other just few things that the agreement does is it establishes a notice for development. So if development is occurring within a half mile of another, either Greeley's growth boundary or Kersey's, we would just let each other know. There's a lot of kind of aspects of this that say, hey, let's get together and talk about things since this is a shared area. We have 4 weeks notice then to give comments on any development that may be occurring. And we do have similar agreements with Weld County for these types of things. It's just kind of a notice. And then terms and termination. So it's an initial 5-year term, and then it would automatically renew for 5 years unless we gave notice to terminate 120 days prior to expiration. So right now, those are kind of the big aspects of the IGA. I wanted to just make a note on meeting timelines. So we went to our planning commission March 26th. As Randy said, they're suggesting approval. This evening, we're speaking with you, and then on April 16th, we'll bring this to be signed at the regular meeting. I attended Greeley's Planning Commission on March 26th, and they were in support. They supported it for their council, went to their work session on the 26th, and then they have their council hearing the same night as ours, and then Kersey will go to their planning commission, I guess this evening, and then their council hearing April 9th. So we're all kind of hitting on the same timeline with the hope that we can all sign it around the same time. However, if there's questions or concerns, we're still in this draft phase, so it can be altered. And with that, I'll take questions, or if Jim has anything to add.
That concludes our remarks.
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems common sense to me.
Agreed.
Great.
Good to get all three communities talking.
Right, absolutely. The one thing that I'll mention that Planning Commission had a question about was in the agreement it states, your comp plan at the time of the agreement. So if we do have an update to our comp plan and it changes something in this area, that's when we would prompt a meeting with Kersey and Greeley and talk about potentially amending the agreement to make sure that we're, remaining in compliance. But yeah, that's that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
About 5-7 minutes, any council discussion?
NPO meeting this Thursday at the city hall.
I do. No one else does. So the 18th, the Evans Chamber will have an after hours at Raven Sign and Studio with Community Grief Center. So if you all would like to make it and be a part of it, it would be great. It's from 5 to 7 p.m. So it would be nice to see you all before we switch committees. That's all I have.
Thank you guys. It's been great. We'll start our meeting in 9 minutes.